Okay, yes.
I te dua umeana te te au te tahiaga o mano. Ai nā i te wali alua i nea i te roa i te tai o wai titi. I ua le ua pua pua i tala au. I ai nā hola ia e tamatani e tautani. O ia te tāne, tāne noho i tawahi ne o tuahi ne na tahuana i tamahoi. Tau i o mano. De hai mari e hoana lui wai di mai valoia. E hai lua mai ana no e ta ola lia. I la i e valia i tamana o. A valia i hono i te tino. Tu au lia hoia ta olelo i kulena i ti pamai ai o to alo puna te oni ta nau e i mua o to mako uaia te alolo ko to puhalau o to o mato i te ewe o te taula piko ho o kahi kako i te aloha 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 aloha
So welcome to the 20th anniversary Hawaiʻi Energy Policy Forum legislative briefing. And we're so glad that you could join us here at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, where the forum first began. It all happened here. And today we think of the forum as a convener, somewhat as a driver, and certainly as a stimulus to help support Hawaii's energy transition. And today, we're here to celebrate moving forward from a near total dependence on imported oil to, with no pathway to alter our course, just in 2002, to this point today, where Hawaii has emerged truly as an energy policy and deployment leader and a globally recognized test bed for energy innovation and energy solutions. More importantly, though, I think we're here today as a rededication and a recommitment to finish the job by addressing the unfinished business in front of us to achieve energy self-sufficiency and a net zero carbon future. We know that it will take a real coalition. It'll take real partnerships and leveraged resources, and a commitment of all of our strategic partners here at the University of Hawaii and all of our academic institutions throughout the state, certainly with the state of Hawaii and all of its agencies, and at the county level, and certainly at the community level where all the action's occurring. So we're all going to do that in close collaboration with our ace in the hole, our federal partners. And to that point, it is most fitting that we present this legislative briefing here today with our key partner since 2008, the U.S. Department of Energy. And we are deeply honored to be able to welcome our special guest and keynote speaker, Deputy Secretary of Energy, David Turk. This is no hyperbole, but there simply could not be a more competent and effective leader second in charge at the Department of Energy. So we're very, very lucky to have this opportunity. The forum also coordinated this year our schedule with Climate Week. And Climate Week was a collaboration organized by the State of Hawaii's Climate Change and Adaptation Commission. And we'll conclude with some special remarks on Climate Week by Leah Laramie, the Climate Commission Coordinator, and we're very much looking forward to that. But we have a lot to do, so let's get started, and we're going to start with a short film.
Hawaii, a place of abundant natural energy, animated by the power of the elements. Hawaii is a model for regenerative land and natural resource management, grounded in a deep love of the land, in aloha aina, and informed by the knowledge that if we take care of the land, she will take care of us. This call to stewardship, to malama aina, is more relevant now than ever before.
For decades, Hawaii has been leading the nation, if not the world, in various aspects of renewable energy generation and use. This has been led by the Hawaii Natural Energy Institute.
20 years ago, the Hawaiʻi Energy Policy Forum was first convened. This coalition of energy stakeholders and thought leaders were the first to push Hawaii in the right direction of becoming energy self-sufficient. And they did that with the clear understanding that Hawaii's over-reliance on imported oil posed perhaps the greatest threat to our economy and our environment.
We've been on this clean energy journey for over a decade, and I'm really happy to say that at the end of 2021, we achieved 38% of electricity from sales being renewables. And so that's a great milestone, and in fact, Hawaii Island was at 60%. I'm really excited that by 2030, we're targeting to reduce carbon emissions by 70%.
This is the first opportunity for a community to plan for the future that they want, the future that's going to affect them the most. We want to have a grid that's stabilized, that's reliable in case of emergency, in case of natural disaster. We want to make sure that our community is prepared, and we want to make sure that we can meet our needs as we grow.
Hawaii's energy transition has been informed by research, development, testing, and evaluation efforts since its inception. With funding from the Office of Naval Research, the State of Hawaii, and the U.S. Department of Energy, HNEI has been at the forefront of these efforts for decades. Hawaii has made incredible progress towards its goal of 100% renewable energy. The improvements in technology, the reduction in the cost of these technologies, and what's been learned have all contributed to this progress.
It's going to take all of us working together to be able to achieve our ultimate goals of 100% renewable energy. We're going to have to renew investments in critical infrastructure, and we're going to also have to work much more closely with communities, because that's where the action is. Thank you. That was pretty cool. So I think we can raise the screen now. You know, when we organized this briefing, it became eminently clear, because you start this 8 months, 10 months ago, that there would be a new gubernatorial administration by the time this rolled around. Fact of the matter is, when we watched the campaign evolve, climate change and environment were one of the key planks, one of the 6 key planks of the person who was chosen by the people of Hawaii by a 2-to-1 margin. Our incoming governor, Josh Green, has taken the challenge of energy transition very seriously. And as a candidate now, and now as governor, he's vowed to rebuild Hawaii's economy in a post-COVID world and to make historic transformative public and private investments to launch a clean energy revolution, pretty bold, that will lead the nation and the world in addressing the climate crisis. And you heard a pledge earlier this week at Climate Week that brought that point home. And on a very personal note, I'm also grateful to Governor Green for the opportunity to serve him in fulfilling that promise. So it's with the greatest pleasure that I invite Governor Josh Green to the stage.
Aloha. Thank you for being here. Housing for all, universal health care, justice reform. What good will those things be if we don't protect our planet in the next decade, 2 decades, 5 decades? These aspirational things which we all believe in begin and end with our capacity to save this planet, which is why we're here today. Because I see extraordinary people from our community, great people from across the country, and everyone knows this. Everyone knows this. We look at equity, we look at economics for the future, and we aspire to be better for our people. My daughter turned 16 yesterday, Maya. And I think what will happen for her, she'll be a lawyer or a physician or an engineer, but without a beautiful Hawaii, without a beautiful planet, we haven't done our job. Let me start by saying, mahalo to the Hawaiʻi Energy Policy Forum. Mahalo, Mark, for putting this together with team members that we respect, that we love. It's great to meet you, David, and to welcome you here to Hawaii. I'll do that more formally in a moment. Nicole Lowen, Bruno, all these people that I see out there, I'm grateful to you. I'm grateful to you for bringing this together because we're like 35 days into the administration only, and we couldn't have even begun to imagine bringing this much excellence, this much vision to bear right at the beginning of our 4 years without your help. Now, you all know our hope is to lead. Our hope is to lead in the Asia-Pacific region on energy. My last name is Green. I will be letting down my forefathers if I don't live up to that promise. We have $1.6 billion in surplus this coming year. Goes up to about $2.7 billion, which is why 3 or 4 days ago as we launched Climate Week, I said we have to spend at least $100 million right off the bat. Set it aside for projects like your vision will allow. And without blowing surprises or punchlines from others, I'm hearing whispers that it'll be much more. When we hear from the House of Representatives and the Senate, I'm hearing that they're committed. They're committed to what you and I believe in. Now, the impact of climate crisis is really just too big to imagine not taking on. Petroleum has got to go. We're going to move on from petroleum. And why? Because if we don't, imagine what the climate refugee crisis will look like in the future. Imagine what the costs and impacts on tourism will be if we don't move on from petroleum. And you all know that we need tourism here. Cost realities, the changes that we'll face in our environment will be unbelievable if we don't take this on now. Hawaii is completely surrounded by water. If we don't affect climate change positively, I can't even imagine the future of Hawaii. So we'll work together with our federal government partners. We'll construct the clean energy grids that you envision. We'll meet the needs here in Hawaii. And even though we are one of the smallest states as far as population goes, it seems to me that we'll have the largest impact, not just symbolically, not mythologically, but in a practical way so we can guide everyone. They can look at Hawaii and see what a partnership looks like with the federal government. Because let's be honest, we got it kind of hardwired. We got Senator Schatz over there and the delegation. I was named after clean energy. We've got President Biden, who certainly, a former president, has his ear, who loves Hawaii, and President Obama, so we can rely on these relationships and the strong support of Congress for Hawaii. We know that our delegation will help us chart a new future for Hawaii's clean energy opportunities. Just yesterday, I was with leaders from Japan who told me, please, Hawaii lead us on things like hydrogen, because they want to partner with Hawaii, with Australia and New Zealand, and back over to Japan. They have the same desires we have to save the globe, and we have the relationships to do it. So to that end, we'll partner with President Biden, Vice President Harris. We'll collaborate, we'll come together like this. We'll establish every possible working relationship that we can come up with. I see some of the real leaders in this state, in the public sector, private sector, university sector, all here in one moment. All you have to do is go somewhere near the Pacific Club and you get half of those people every single morning. Talking about what we can do together. That's why we're here today. We're here to establish this relationship. We're here to make sure that we in Hawaii play that pivotal role for the globe. Now, I'll just say a couple more things about Hawaii. When people come here, and they come from faraway countries, when it's the UN folks that come here, when it's red staters meeting with blue staters, they seem just a little different when they're in our midst. I don't know if it's because they put on aloha shirts and slippers. I don't know if it's just because they're allowed to let go of some of the trappings of Washington, D.C., but it seems like Oahu truly does become a gathering place. And people seem more open-minded about all of these issues that we're wrestling with every day. And so I would hope that as your governor, I can keep bringing people together. And I hope you'll ask me to invite these people into Hawaii to set up the best plans, the best strategies, the best investment, so that Hawaii is that incubator on clean energy for the future. So thank you all. Thank you for welcoming me into your lives again for these 4 years. And now let me say a few words about David Turk, who is exceptional in every way. I just met David. He has 3 children, so what does that mean? You can be sure he is committed to this future. And you can be sure he wants to move to Hawaii already. He's only been here 12 hours. David was born in Ecuador. He was raised in Illinois in the Midwest. He went to law school at UVA with friends of mine, by the way, we just discovered. He works with Joe Biden, who believes in clean energy. He's been a leader. If you look at where he's been in just his first 4 decades, he's going to turn 50 this year, which is about the right age to take on this role. Been a special assistant to the president, President Obama. Been a director at the National Security Council. This is national security. Energy is national security. Envoy on climate. Deputy Executive Director of International Energy Agency. This guy kicks butt. But now he's ours for a couple days. So I just want to say thank you, David. We welcome you into our ohana, which is our family, as you know. I appreciate you. I appreciate you bringing ideas to us. I appreciate you educating me on hydrogen. I appreciate you bringing opportunities to this, the most beautiful and, from my standpoint, important energy state in America. So come on up, David. Aloha.
Wow, what a welcome. Aloha. I wish my mom could have heard that. Thank you, Governor, and congratulations on 35 days down and many, many more days to go. I have the privilege of working in Washington, D.C., not only with President Biden, but the Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, is just a true, someone has met her before. What you see in public is what you get in private. And one thing our secretary does is she's got a whiteboard in her office, and she tracks down day by day how many days we have in this first term of the Biden administration. It turns out, because of the federal holidays and some changes recently, at least in the federal government, we have 1,000 days. 1,000 days over that 4-year period of time. So 35 days in, I'm not sure what it translates in with Hawaiian holidays and whatnot. That is not that many days. That's why it's particularly exciting to be here early in your term, Governor. Congratulations on your election. Congratulations on the team. Incredibly excited to work with Mark and the State Energy Office. Thank you for coordinating this. Thank you for inviting us to come out here. I think Mark starts on Monday, so your clock will start ticking as of then. And a particular thanks to be on this beautiful campus. It's just a great campus. Thanks to the provost. Thanks for everyone coordinating this meeting and hosting us here today. I'm particularly excited. I thought what I might do is put down the formal remarks. We've got great speechwriters and others who put these things together for us in Washington, but in the spirit of being out here in this beautiful location and just speaking from the heart. I do have three kids, as the governor mentioned. My oldest is going to be 18 here in just a couple months. And I think for many of us, this is our jobs, but it's also our passion. I've been working in climate and clean energy for many, many years now. And I'm particularly excited to be out here visiting with you all at what I think is a magic moment. And you don't get magic moments that often in your life, whether personal or professional, but I truly, truly believe that. I think there are two fundamental reasons that I think that's the case. And I'll put them out there, and hopefully we'll get into this in the discussion. And we should all check ourselves, is that true? Are we in a magic moment to make historic progress that we feel good about, not only for ourselves, but our kids and future generations, or not? And if we are in that magic moment, what can we do? How do we step up? How do we work in partnership? Nothing gets done unless you're working with others, supporting others, taking a low ego approach. Doesn't matter who gets credit as long as good stuff happens and it gets done at the pace and scale that we need it to happen. All right, so here's my two reasons I think we're in a magic moment and the state of Hawaii, the communities in Hawaii in particular. One is Hawaii is a leader, has been a leader, is a leader, and what I would put for your consideration needs to be a leader. Our world desperately needs leaders in the climate and clean energy space. As someone who's looked at the numbers, looked at a bunch of modeling analysis, how do we get to net zero? How do we do it in the pace and scale we need to? President Biden has put the marker out there, rightfully so in my opinion, and I'm incredibly proud to be part of this administration. We need to, as a country, get to net zero by 2050. Now, for some who are a little younger here, 2050 may sound like it's a ways off, but that is not that long off. That is 27 years, even less now that we're into 2023. 27 years to fundamentally transform not just electricity, of course, transportation, buildings, industry, all parts of our economy. Fundamentally transform for climate benefit, for jobs, for economic opportunity, you name it. So we need leadership. There is no way we make progress in our country unless we have some states and some communities who are leading. There's no way we make progress internationally unless we have states like Hawaii and the U.S. more generally stepping up and leading. And this is not just a government exercise, far from it. Industry needs to lead, NGO needs to lead, students need to lead. We're seeing more and more leadership out there, but we need to execute on that leadership. But I see that in Hawaii. I've been following what you all have been doing ever since 2008 and even before, putting some incredibly ambitious markers on the table in terms of 100% clean energy going forward. So we need that leadership. We need to support that leadership. I also have to say your representatives in D.C., again speaking from the heart, are kicking ass on this subject, are kicking ass on climate change. Senator Schatz, Senator Hirono, your congressional delegation, your House delegates, inspiring. I think they're some of the most persuasive, some of the clearest advocates pushing things along. And we've had some success. We've had some success on the legislative front. So I know leadership's not easy. That's a lot of responsibility that's put on all of our shoulders to execute and to be true to that leadership. But thank you for the leadership to date, and thank you for Hawaii's leadership going forward. So that's point one. The second point, and I'm particularly excited being part of the Department of Energy and the federal government right now, Mark mentioned we're the ace in the hole. I feel like our federal government has been maybe a two of clubs or a three of spades or or something like that at various points in the past. But I think it actually is true right now. We are an ace in the hole. We can be, and we will need to be, an incredible wind behind your back as you step up on your leadership. I know many of you, because you're in this space, have been following what's been going on in Congress. Historic legislation. Just to give you a few numbers about what passed over the last 2-year period of time. $500 billion, that's billion with a B. The U.S. nor anyone else ever in the history of humanity has ever put those kinds of numbers on the table in terms of supporting the clean energy revolution, supporting climate change efforts. That's tax credits across the board, incredible incentives, 10-year certainty for those who are developers and those who are in industry. You know how important having some certainty for those tax credits are. Consumer rebates, not just helping businesses do what they need to do and pushing on that front, but consumer rebates for efficiency, for PVs, for EVs, heat pumps, you name it. And of course, we need to make that accessible. We need to make that clear. We need to make the case for everyone to step up on that front. At my department, at the Department of Energy, we have $100 billion. Our annual budget, and we do nuclear weapons and a whole bunch of other stuff, is about $45 billion on a regular basis. When you break that up in terms of what's being pushed on the climate and clean energy side, it's nowhere near that. Now we have $100 billion. Turns out that's about 70, 80 different programs, technologies across the board. So we're talking $8 billion for hydrogen hubs, and I know there's a application in from a number of partners on the hydrogen front, and eager to talk about that going forward. $7.5 billion to build out the EV charging infrastructure here in Hawaii, across the country as well. I could go on and on and on. That is a lot of money. The intent is there. The execution needs to be there to support you and to make sure that you're taking advantage fully of these resources, not just at the Department of Energy, but across the federal government as well. And of course, we're not just talking about decarbonization and doing what we need to do to save the planet as well. There's a huge economic opportunity here, especially for a state like Hawaii. I know your bills are high. I know it's been challenging with the ban on Russian petroleum, and that's had some impacts that we're trying to help you all navigate through. There's huge job opportunities. And when we speak about jobs in this administration, it's not just any jobs. We're talking about quality jobs. We're talking about apprenticeships and making sure that these are jobs, as the President has spoken so incredibly eloquent on, that support families going forward along those lines. It's reducing those energy costs. I'm a firm believer, having studied these issues for years and years, you can decarbonize and you can reduce energy costs and you can promote your energy security. You got to do it in a smart way, you got to do it in a thoughtful way, and you got to do it in a way that partners going forward. And lastly, and this is a real priority for this administration, again, something I think many of us feel very passionately about, as we go through this energy transition, we can help communities and people who've gotten screwed in the past. Right? You can call it environmental justice, you can call it righting historic wrongs, you can call it whatever you want, but we've got an incredible opportunity to use this funding, use these tools, not just to save our planet, but save communities, especially those that have gotten the short end of the stick here in the past. So let me just end on partnership. The governor mentioned this, Mark mentioned this. I think this will come up again and again. We're not a top-down system where everything good comes from DC. In fact, I'm not sure how often that happens. I think DC is best when it's in listening mode and support mode and making sure that we're bringing the tools that are most needed, most applicable, most useful, most catalytic for what you all are trying to do. So when I talk partnership, I think it's an extreme kind of partnership going forward. It's the public and the private, it's state, it's local, it's NGOs, community leaders, it's universities, it's young people beginning their careers, it's people who've gained a wealth of experience bringing that to bear, and all of us in between along those lines. We have a magic moment. Again, I would firmly put for your consideration. The question to me is, do we seize that moment? Do we work in partnership? Do we put egos to the side? Are we creative? Are we ambitious? Are we ambitious enough given the scale of the challenge that's in front of us? How do we do our part? How do we make sure that we're helping others do their part? Nothing would make me happier if Hawaii is wildly successful in your energy transition. That is good first and foremost for the people of Hawaii, but I can tell you that is absolutely necessary for the rest of the country to do what it needs to do, and it's absolutely necessary for the world to do what it needs to do. So thank you very much for having me here. I look forward to listening, to learning, and it's all about execution. It's all about the follow-through and what we can do together. But thank you very much for hosting this meeting and for having the Department of Energy and the U.S. government more generally participate. Thank you.
So we're coming to a thank you so much for those very, very encouraging and inspirational comments. Very exciting, and we welcome the challenge. We're now entering a very exciting dialogue, one-on-one dialogue, and I'm going to invite a good friend and a very talented individual who used to run the Sierra Club, and then after that, the Blue Planet Foundation, and now is heavily engaged in convening. And you all know who I'm talking about, Jeff Mikulina, and he will conduct a one-on-one interview with David Turk. Join us.
Thank you, Mark. And before we begin, I have a quick public service announcement. Apparently, breakfast is served out on the lanai, so help yourself, but don't do it now. Wait until the next panel and do it. Deputy Secretary, welcome. Good morning.
Thank you, Jeff. It's great to be here. And the last time I was here in Hawaii, I remember very distinctly coming back to Washington, D.C., which I was living at the time. And it was raining, it was cold, it was February, and the question I asked myself is, why am I not living in Hawaii? So it's great to be with you on a whole range of fronts.
It's great. So we're going to have a little fireside chat without the fire, because we're concerned about climate. So you talked a bit about this magic moment, which is truly incredible, and you're in a pole position in your current role. And it's not just the policies that we have. We're at a tipping point for climate. We have a number of years to really hit that inflection point. And then, as you brought up, two of the biggest appropriation bills in history, bringing in hundreds of billions to fight our climate challenge. But now we need to move from policy to implementation, and a lot of that's on the state level. So could you share a bit about what keeps you up at night when it comes to execution, implementation?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jeff. So I think two things. One, we're behind the curve, right? We should have been doing even more 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And so we need to execute incredibly quickly. And that's what keeps me up at night. Like, we need to execute, we need to implement, and we need to do it ambitiously, we need to do it quickly. The pace and scale of what we're up against is really daunting for those who've looked at the numbers. And obviously, we're all seeing the impacts of climate change, not just in Hawaii, but all around our country and world. 2/3 of Pakistan at one point during this last year was flooded. 2/3 of a whole country. That's just incredible.
It's in the past 10 years, so much of energy policy has been at the state level, largely due to inaction in Congress, largely due to just the need for states to move and the ability for them to move. Now we have these funding opportunities. It's going to come back to the state houses. I mean, we're going to have to implement it to get these funds. Can you talk a bit about, first of all, the role of states in driving climate policy, and then particularly Hawaii? How can Hawaii set itself up for success?
Yeah, so I've been around the block enough on this to know that good things happen in the world because people are working at it day in and day out at the local level, at the state level, whether from the company side of things, whether from the government side of things, from the NGO side of things. I think the model that works the best is when the federal government has a bunch of tools in the tool belt. We have the engagement on a day in, day out basis. We listen. We say, oh, you might think about this, or you've got a comparative advantage here, and we've got this grant opportunity coming out here. You may think about this piece for your part of the equation. We've got some phenomenal labs around our country. We can bring analytical tools and other planning tools to work with the State Energy Office, to work with others on the planning piece as well. But I think you should think of us as the wind behind your back, and that requires a lot of partnership. That requires a lot of listening and that ongoing engagement. And if we can't do that, then we're not being true to what role we need to play from the Department of Energy and the federal government.
You spent some time both in the Obama administration and now the Biden administration spearheading a lot of energy innovation. So in that role, I'm sure you saw a lot, probably got excited about a lot of things. Can you share what are some dark horse, innovations that are coming down the pike that most excite you?
When you talk about net zero and the president's goal of net zero by 2050, that's, again, not just electricity, it's industry, a whole range of industries. It's transportation. It's what some people call harder to decarbonize sectors. So it's been said often, but I think bears repeating, there's not a silver bullet. I think it's a silver buckshot, and we've got to work on innovation and driving costs down on a whole range of technologies. Now, a lot of that work has been done. We've got PV costs in incredibly exciting places. Our EV costs are being driven down, including with $7,500 tax credits on new vehicles, $4,000 tax credits on EV used vehicles, which I think will have an incredibly big impact going forward, especially as the EV market matures even further. And we've seen some incredible growth in PVs and wind and solar heretofore, but we've got to do that across the board. We need solutions for cement, we need solutions for steel, we need solutions for heavy-duty freight, we need aviation solutions, and so we need a whole range of key technologies out there. And this is a great opportunity. I know we've got some folks here at the university and others beginning their career. It doesn't need to be even beginning your career. There's a huge entrepreneurial opportunity here. And we need to have innovation hubs and innovation centers all around our country really working on these issues.
Let's talk a bit about that innovation, because Hawaii is really in this unique position. And we have a long history of innovation, dating way back to original voyagers wayfinding to Hawaii. But since then, first palace with electric lights. About 40 years ago, we had, or 35 years ago, had the largest wind turbine on Earth on this island. And then since then, obviously, some other exciting developments, like at one time, the largest solar plus battery over in Kauai. Share what you think are Hawaii's competitive advantages when it comes to innovation. What can we really show the world? And I know, Governor Green mentioned the mythology. We want this to be real, but I do like the mythology of Archimedes moving the world with a long enough lever, and Hawaii could be that fulcrum. So what's our competitive advantage there?
So I'm eager to hear and learn and understand and appreciate what you all think are your comparative advantages and where we can bring the tools. My colleague Henry McCoy, who's been here for a few days, who's the head of a new office. When we had all this new money coming in the Department of Energy, we created this new office at Henry Lee's called the State and Community Energy Program Office to make sure that we had that ongoing engagement, the ongoing listening, because we don't know best. We can bring some analytical tools, we can bring some experience to the table and try to do that matchmaking of this technology, that technology going forward along those lines. I'll mention a few, though, just to be specific and maybe provocative, and you can say, Dave, you're wrong, this doesn't make any sense. We are more along those lines. Being an island, being a series of islands has its challenges. Higher energy costs are one of them, but there's some advantages in that. It's a little bit more bite-sized, although it's not bite-sized so much. Like, these are big islands and complicated grids and other kinds of features to it. But there's some real opportunities there to do things at a scale, at a pace, where I think others are a little bit more challenged along those lines. So I think there's a series of opportunities on that front. There's solar resource, there's wind resources, there's other resources as well. And a large part of that is bringing it all together in the grids, having smart grids, having responsive grids, taking advantage of storage and other key technologies in which we're driving those costs down as well. I could mention agrivoltaics, where you put solar PV and you grow crops. I'm going to visit a site today, eager to see that. I think that's a really interesting way to think about the opportunity space going forward along those lines. So I think there's a number of areas that I would put into it. It's also clear to me, and maybe this is overstating it a little bit, everybody knows everybody, and those partnerships are how you really get things done. And it is people in those partnerships that ultimately do it. And hopefully there's some advantages there and people of goodwill really stepping up on that front.
Really appreciate you mentioning when you gave your remarks that this isn't just about reducing carbon. This is really about reducing the cost of living. It's about creating healthier communities, providing good jobs. Where do you think the state, what are the top 3 things the state can do to really make sure we do this transition right when it comes to those 3 pieces?
First of all, and it's clear to me, you've got a governor here who's incredibly eloquent and passionate about this. It's leaders putting a vision out there, right? I remember, and I don't want this to sound political, but I worked at an international energy agency during the previous administration. And that lack of U.S. vision and U.S. leadership had a big impact globally. So when you see leadership and you see vision, you appreciate how important it is. And I think the true leadership and the true vision is one that makes room for other leaders and visions to come in there, right? If the private sector is incredibly successful on sustainable aviation fuels, or you name it, and there's credit from a corporate perspective, credit for a university stepping up, credit for the state government stepping up. It's that vision and that shared leadership and really appreciating how important the goal is, and to be very goal-focused and very egoless to achieve that.
So important. Something that I just saw in the news the other day, I'd be curious to hear your response. 2022, at a time when we need greenhouse gas emissions to be dropping to achieve our climate goals, to keep temperature below 2 degrees Celsius, 2022 we saw them rise a little bit. What gives you optimism when you see news like that?
Yeah, so it's tough, I got to say. So our emissions in the U.S. are going to increase, have increased in 2022. There's some preliminary estimates. The Rhodium Group and others have put some preliminary numbers on the table. I remember very clearly when I was with the International Energy Agency, which is sort of like the world's energy watchdog, and I was brought on board to help lead the clean energy and climate efforts there. We saw a real dip in emissions during COVID. No surprise, people were staying home, they weren't driving as much, and we put out some analysis there to say, boy, wouldn't it be great if every country really stepped up at this particular moment in time, had sustainable recoveries that were focused on the climate, focused on clean energy, and driving those costs down. And so we didn't have a rise in emissions. We kind of just used this opportunity to really drive those emissions down further. Not because of COVID, but because of smart policy and all the benefits that go with that. What we're seeing, unfortunately, is emissions are coming back up. And that's not where we need to be. We need to drive those down. And we need countries like the U.S. to step up, and we need to work with countries around the world to make sure that their emissions peak and go down further. So what gives me optimism? I got to say, Jeff, the thing that gives me optimism is the more I talk to people who are in this space, who are passionate in this space, who are dedicated in this space, day in and day out, people who don't just have jobs, but they have things they're thinking about in the shower, they're thinking about at night, it keeps them up at night. We could do this, we could do that, how do we partner here or there? And ultimately, I think that's how it gets it done. The robots aren't in charge yet. We're still in charge, and we've got agency to do right and to really step up.
So true. I think something else that sort of got left out of that story was we saw economic growth in 2022. So there's a bit of decoupling from emissions and growth. We didn't see as much greenhouse gas emissions increase as we did with economic growth.
It's exactly right, and we need to decouple quicker along those lines, and we need to have solutions that work in a Hawaii context, in a U.S. context, but also work in India, in Africa, and Latin America, and countries around the world, because these are global emissions, and it doesn't matter where those emissions emissions come from. And so we need to decouple. We need to decouple quicker and really step up with real-world successes. I'm also, and this is, I hopefully got this across in my opening as well. When leaders are successful, others pay attention. And they're like, wow, you did that and you brought costs down, you got a bunch of jobs and manufacturing facilities and other things. And they're like, I'm sure the governor, if he's wildly successful, will get other governors coming to him and saying, boy, governor, you really kicked butt on this. How'd you do it? And then others will follow. But you need leaders to lead so followers can follow. And that's the stage we're in right now.
Just a few other questions, because I think we're probably slightly behind schedule. Actually, most important, they left out of your bio, I think, the most important school you attended, which is the best public school in the nation, University of Illinois. So were you more of a Cam's or Cochran's kind of?
I was more of a go to the gym and play basketball. I didn't play for the University of Illinois team, but one of my pride and joys is I was able to play on the intramurals team, and it's a big school. It's a Big Ten school. And my then girlfriend, now wife, and this is why she's my wife, took a picture of me dunking the basketball in the big Assembly Hall stadium. And this was back before you had the ability to take 1,000 pictures. You had to like print them and like take them down to the Walgreens or CVS or whatnot. So that's why she became my wife. So I was more the gym rat.
That's hilarious. And she left out the little springboard.
That's right. She cut out the trampoline.
It is a great school, by the way, but I think it's so funny. If you ever saw the movie Risky Business, there's a scene where he opens the letter, the acceptance letter to go to Harvard, and he gets rejected, and he says, looks like University of Illinois. But apparently you can do pretty well coming out of that school. So let's just wrap up with a final question, looking at, in the next briefing, you're going to talk a bit about the challenges and opportunities to ensure energy security, community resilience, grid modernization, which are really key issues that Hawaii is facing now and legislators need to address. So given our progress to date, can you envision Hawaii as sort of a place of technical assistance, a hub for this innovation for the Asia-Pacific region and beyond?
Yeah, so I not only can envision it, but I think we need to have that vision if we're going to be successful. And again, leaders lead, and that's not just in the U.S. context. As the governor was saying with his conversations with the Japanese, and I've heard this over and over again, if things can happen here in Hawaii, I think that's an incredible catalyst for not only Pacific Islands more generally, but Southeast Asia, Asia. I think people are watching. People are watching, and Hawaii in particular.
That's great. We so appreciate you coming out and your leadership at DOE. So mahalo. It's been great talking with you.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jeff. Great job. And thank you. A really great discussion. Learned a lot. I'd like to invite now the Provost of the University of Hawaii at Manoa, Michael Bruno, and the Governor of Hawaii back to the stage for a similar type of discussion, but we'll start probing into some of those issues that came up. So this will be a pretty engaging discussion, and you can pitch in at any time you would like. I know that first and foremost, I think on many people's minds is about the pace of funding. And it's a real big issue because there's formula grants to the states, and there are processes for that that have been really challenging in the flow of funds. So I guess a question for you, Deputy Secretary. I know it's a big priority to try to speed that up, but what are some of the things that are going on, and how difficult a question is that?
Yeah, so we're especially those of us who have spent years and years working on the climate change and clean energy front, I think and hope we're all impatient in a good in a good way. We should all be impatient. Our Secretary Granholm, is impatient. That's why she has a number of days on her whiteboard counting down. So we have weekly meetings and sometimes even more often, and the question that she asks on all those meetings is, can we expedite that timeline? Can we put that money out even quicker? The way we do things is we usually do what's called a request for information to say, we're thinking about doing it this way, does that make sense? And love to make sure we're getting the state of Hawaii's feedback on that and industry's feedback, so we can design these programs to be maximal leverage out there. And then we put the funding opportunity out there, and we have some kind of process. We're trying to be thoughtful and creative, like with our hydrogen hubs. Instead of just having one, give us your big proposal and we'll give you a decision, we're actually going through a few steps. So we said, give us a short concept note on what your hydrogen hub concept is, and then we'll say, does that make sense or does that not make so much sense? Hawaii's made sense to us and kind of made it through that next gate. And so we're trying to be very practical and pragmatic, and again, listening all the way.
So this is really a question for each of you, and particularly to the governor and the provost. You know, it's been clear all of this funding is at our fingertips, but what are the priorities that you see kind of most prevalent? I think Deputy Secretary had, wanted to, of course, know our competitive advantages, but what are also some of those places that we see important investments that need to take place?
Thank you. So for me, in some ways, the priority is speed, because I want to be just super blunt. We don't know what each 2- and 4-year interval will be, and we could get back into a semi-fascist executive branch in 2 years, and then we won't have these opportunities again, which makes me nervous. All of a sudden it goes up in smoke, literally, these great plans. And so I really think we want to get going. So when I look out around our crowd, and I see friends that are already going down the road of digesters, that are going down the road of helping convert some of our transitions, whether it's fossil fuels all across the boards, but as we have all of our solar initiatives and all of these complete priorities that are there for our energy self-sufficiency, I don't want to wait. And I could see 4, 5, or 6 major areas of potential right away. But hearing from our number 2 energy person in the country, it's amazing to sit 4 feet away and have his cell phone and he mine and just say, okay, Hawaii, this is available to you today. This is available to you within 60 days or 3 months. I mean, that is an amazing thing. So we never stop in the state getting different potential plans in place, but we don't know if we're going to see the funding. I will say this, the crunch is on for us in Hawaii. The cost of living, in some people's minds, I think, it's more immediate than the impact of climate change. Now, climate change is going to be much more important long term, but the immediacy of getting energy costs down, getting people into a place where they're not paying, in some cases, the highest kilowatt hour rates in the country, that's really important to us. So we're going to drive as hard as they will drive us. We'll drive ourselves. So it's that timetable for us.
So when I think about investments from the university's perspective, I think about people and think about relationships, and I think HNEI and the Energy Forum have really been a national leader in those things. We as a university, and I know I'm looking out, I see at least 3 of our deans here, and I know a number of faculty are here, and we think about, we even worry about taking the good work that they do, the research and scholarship that goes on, and finding a way to let it see the light of day. And the governor and the deputy secretary earlier both spoke about practical, they both spoke about relationships, and to make that transition from the laboratory and the field into good use for society benefit is something that we, I think, more and more think about. We think about it every day, and this is one of the areas of our work where we have really had success in that regard. And from my perspective, from the president's perspective, from the perspective of a lot of the leadership out in this room, we're committed to continue to invest in that and in those relationships. Your transition back into state government is an example of that. We have these very close relationships across industry, across government, that allow these innovations to happen and allow our good work to see the light of day.
So I found it really interesting. The governor talked about an urgency that was very practical in terms of this moment in time and how long it could last, administration-wise, and so on. And David Turk talked very clearly. Deputy Secretary, you mentioned about how far behind we are. So there's great urgency to move faster. One of the and you also mentioned that all solutions don't necessarily need to come top down. So from a regional perspective, where there are these skills outstanding, and particularly at institutions like University of Hawaii at Manoa with engineering as well as economics and sustainability, how do we amass that, and how do we put together essentially a greater multidisciplinary team to make things happen faster? Any ideas on that?
Maybe one I'll offer up. I was just out at Stanford yesterday. It was terrible weather there. It was raining. They had an atmospheric river. It's much nicer here. But I was meeting with some of the folks. They have a new school of sustainability, and I was meeting with one of the folks who set that up. And what he was saying is the biggest challenge is to get the quote-unquote hard sciences working with the social sciences, and we absolutely need to do that. It needs to be interdisciplinary. We need to think of the human piece to it as we're working on the technology piece, and that's a challenge for every university to do, but I think there's a huge prize there if we're successful.
Yeah.
David's so right on, because we all know that the Hawaiian culture has to inform what we do here, and so we've been starting to incorporate sociologists into all of our conversations. So it's really happening, in absolute real time. And that's one of the, I think, the benefits of us being a small community. I mean, we're transforming everything all at once, right? We're looking, like I mentioned earlier, at tourism. And so we're going to have not just the marketing piece of tourism, but the management piece. And that means the management piece of our culture, too. And so we're incorporating culture into these plans. I almost want every single one of our energy plans, housing plans, economic plans to include that, because otherwise we're really not in Hawaii working together.
And Michael, would you say that the university's even greater posed today than it ever was at being able to bridge those gaps, so those communication gaps, particularly among these departments, in the way that we can structure things?
Yeah, it's I think a long road. It's a long path that we can point to. So maybe many people in the room don't realize how old HNEI is, and the wisdom of the state, the governor, and the legislature at the time, nearly 50 years ago, to create the HNEI. And across 50 years, you develop the credibility, but importantly here in Hawaii, you develop the trust. So that trust now exists in a strong way from this university to the government at all levels, and to industry, and to the governor's point, I think also importantly, out into the community. There is that trust that allows our faculty and eventually our students to go out and do the great work that this state, this place needs us to do.
So I want to veer a little bit into a supply chain question, because that's so important, particularly here. I know that's slowed down for all of you developers and the utilities in the room. the pace of already approved projects by the Public Utilities Commission and what we have to do to kind of change course because they're delayed and so on. I know that you recently met in, I think, late August with Kathleen Hicks, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and you'd mentioned during that time about how the bipartisan infrastructure law gave us this unprecedented opportunity to kind of rebuild or retool these industries we've lost. Now, a lot of that's going to take time. Is there any sort of near-term solutions that we could look to as we try to, get supplies back? And especially as we're a little bit more wary of doing business in certain places around the world. Tough question.
Yeah, and China being one of those, of course, just to put that on the table explicitly. So I think this is one of the most exciting parts of the opportunity that we have here, and very consciously from the congressional side and certainly from this administration, we have had supply chain challenges. COVID threw a whole bunch of things out of whack, and we're living in the consequences of that. But even beyond COVID, when you look at battery manufacturing, and it's not just the mining part of it, it's all the stages in between, all those processing stages. Right now, one country dominates all of that, and that's China. And what we have now is a whole bunch of money, authority, tax credits, other kinds of things to build out in the United States, including in Hawaii, a battery manufacturing ecosystem. And we're starting to see that happen. Incredibly exciting. We put out $2.8 billion on battery manufacturing for some cost shares. There's tax incentives. There's announcement after announcement. Different parts of the country are getting a little bit more on the battery manufacturing side. This is where we need to make sure all of the benefits of these programs overall go to communities across the country. But that's incredibly exciting. So we've got an opportunity like I don't know if we've ever had before to onshore or re-onshore. It's going to take some time. There's going to be some challenge along that interim time period, but I think it's incredibly exciting.
Well, it would kind of blow my mind if we manufactured anything in Hawaii, which would be incredible. We manufacture just very small pieces of what we export. And we manufacture Aloha, and people come for it. There's no question. But if we could be a manufacturer of batteries, that would be amazing. Plus, this is just the observation of one person, but as soon as we tip past, say, 12 or 14 hours of really good battery storage, we're going to be killing it here in Hawaii, because I think because of our super presence in solar and, of course, our environment, I would expect that it changes a lot of the calculations for what we can do. We have a lot of potential. I mean, we have geothermal, and we have, in addition to our solar, wind, and so on and so forth, and we're excited about hydrogen. If you can, further excite us to produce, but we've not had that opportunity to be a production center of much. And I came up on Big Island, and we do actually have the capacity to generate a lot of energy on Big Island. It's a huge landmass, as everyone knows. The rest of the islands, as I'm sure you're aware, can fit inside of Big Island. But the economy on the Big Island is always struggling. About half of the people on Big Island live at or near the poverty line. So you could change the entire economic potential for our county on Big Island, and therefore our state, if you made that available to us. So that's why I get so excited when I see David here and I hear our congressional delegation talking about billion-dollar or multi-billion-dollar investment in energy in Hawaii, because I see the Big Island surging forward, and therefore all the downstream benefits. Fewer people on Medicaid, fewer people struggling to make a living, lower energy costs, and so on. So energy solutions become human solutions for us in Hawaii.
Extremely valuable. I wanted to follow up on one of the earlier discussions about how we, can maybe be a little bit more receptive to some of the changes that need to take place. Like, I know that there are really kind of obscure requirements, like, and they for good reason. But is there flexibility to? You talked about going through an RFI process, and I know that we always respond and we provide good advice. But our scale and our and our needs are fundamentally different, and sometimes that doesn't get reflected in the solicitations. Is there room for more direct engagement that isn't always competitively done through competitive process?
So I think the federal government, and I'd put my department, this is my second time in the Department of Energy, has been pretty crappy about doing community engagement and listening and making sure that we're making available the tools that we've got. Now, there's phenomenal talent, there's phenomenal civil servants. I don't want to disparage anybody, but I don't think we've been doing things the way we need to be doing. That's why we have done the biggest reorganization in the Department of Energy's history, and one of the most key parts of it, and I'd actually put it as the most important part, is the office that Henry McCoy is leading, our State and Community Energy Program office, which is meant to work day in and day out, listen, work, try to tailor the strategy, try to say, hey, maybe you're not thinking about this, but you could be thinking about this. Maybe this is a little bit less of a fit. This is coming up. How does this fit with this? And how do you think about all these pieces adding up on that front? And easier to say that, much more difficult to execute that. That's why we brought in someone like Henry and the top talent to try to make that happen. And you all need to hold us accountable on that. The other part that I think is exciting is we do have some phenomenal national labs and some phenomenal analytical tools. One that I'd point out, and Governor, I want to, in our discussions later today, talk with you and Mark and others about this. Our National Renewable Energy Lab has been doing some analysis with different communities who are leaders to step up and say, what is your 100% clean energy transition plan? Do stakeholder engagement, have buy-in by the community. They did it in LA with an LA 100 process. We're now making that available to states, communities, others who want it. We don't have the bandwidth to do it for everybody, but we want to see if there's a good fit. It's C2C is the acronym, communities to communities kind of process. And it's not federal government telling you, it's listening to what your needs are as you get into your job, Mark, and making sure that any analytical tools and say, boy, this community did this state did this, you may learn from this, cautionary tale here, just to try to help accelerate those timelines, just as the governor was saying. So eager to talk about that, but that's the intent, but it's all about execution.
Well, look forward to learning more about that. Because we are running over time, I just ask for any parting comments that any of you might have, and then we'll go into the next session.
Well, I appreciate you coming, David. It's great. And you described a magical moment, like a perfect storm, that kind of thing. And so we have some additional perfect storm moments here in Hawaii, which I know you're aware of, but I'll say it out loud to everyone here. We have the Red Hill circumstance, right, which is a terrible circumstance, to say the least. And what it will mean for us is that we have to really work harder than ever with our military ohana that's in the state of Hawaii to solve some of the problems that are here. That's created an environmental catastrophe for us, and it's water related. But it also has created an interesting opportunity because we're with them so much more trying to solve that problem, and then other problems end up getting discussed. And so in reference to the question earlier about whether we can comfortably go around competitive bids and just have it come to Hawaii, I'm just being blunt. I think that we house an incredible number of individuals that are with the military. They have energy needs, they have housing needs. We are now connected always for good or ill. And so this is another space for us to reach out to them, and therefore, of course, to the federal government, say, all right, we need your support if we're going to do a major hydrogen project, if we're going to do major grid reform, if we're going to make sure that we get disproportionately sized resources coming to Hawaii because we're looking outward to the Pacific. I would just posit that this is our opportunity to accelerate all of the different dreams that we have as energy leaders vis-a-vis Red Hill, our housing crisis, and so on. I think this is our chance because Hawaii is unique. It's beautiful, it's spectacular, it's culturally diverse, but it's also unique in that it is needed by the mainland United States more than ever. And so I'm going to use that as an opportunity for us to find extra ways to help you partner with DOE and therefore us.
Maybe sneak in 3 real quick things. One, we've got a lot of work to do on the interagency piece, including with DOD. I'm actually having dinner with Kath Hicks, who's the Deputy Secretary at DOE this weekend, and happy to talk to her on some of these issues and try to have coherence, which the federal government has not been great about. Secondly, Governor, and you put this incredibly well at the beginning of this panel, just the speed and the urgency of taking advantage of this magic moment. You never know what's coming around the door, so if there's things we can do today and urgently, like this is the window to do it and to lock it in on that piece. Third, the other supply chain issue I worry about, and actually worry about this even more, is the human supply chain piece. We're hiring at DOE. We're bringing in hundreds of people to help administer these programs, to work in offices like Henry's office. That is the most important supply chain issue that we need to work on. And so hopefully more and more people will get into the space, will devote their lives to it, and that's what I think will ultimately be successful.
That's such a great point, and we'll talk more about that. But we face the same problem, and there are so many requests to do things. Our capacity to actually do the technical assistance that we're capable of doing does rely on us soliciting things almost in advance before we even get projects. So, would like to talk to you more about that. I think with that, very happy that we had this opportunity to chat, and we'll let you now go on to your next things, and we'll begin our transportation panel shortly. I'd like to actually allow everyone to take a 10-minute break and go outside and go to the restroom, and we'll convene in 10 minutes. Thank you.
So.